Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Stephen Carroll, and this is Here's Why, where we take one news story and explain it in just a few minutes with our experts here at Bloomberg.
Russian drones violated Polish airspace and, of course, NATO's airspace.
Every one of us on the eastern flank are facing certain risk every single night.
It could well have been a deliberate action by the Russians and the Belarusians to see how good Polish counter-drone reaction was.
Putin's message is clear, and our response must be clear too.
This new technology of the mass use of drones is a threat to all of the EU and NATO, and we need to face it together.
It was a move that sent alarm bells ringing around Europe. A volley of Russian attack drones breached Polish territory, the most serious incursion into a NATO member state since the war in Ukraine began in 2022. Drone warfare has been a central part of that conflict, and it's highlighted the importance of having sufficient defences against these unmanned aircraft. But keeping up with the fast-evolving technology is challenging and expensive. Here's why NATO needs better drone defences. Our global defence editor Gerry Doyle joins me now for more. Gerry, first of all, how big is the potential threat from Russian drones?
Well, much depends on what type of drones that they're sending out. These one-way attack drones, the heavier ones, the Shaheds, those can do serious damage. They have the explosive potential of a 155 millimeter artillery shell, perhaps more. Other drones are used for surveillance and reconnaissance, spotting for artillery, and sometimes they just are flown around to cause confusion and harassment. So much depends on what type of drones are being used. The ones that actually flew across the border did not seem to pose too much of a military threat, but certainly they could cause confusion and alarm on the ground. Certainly they could gather information about the disposition and placement of European military forces. And certainly they do show Russia something about the preparedness and the defenses that Europe has on the ground to deal with this type of threat.
So what sort of defences do NATO countries along that eastern border actually have against drones at the moment?
Well, they have the same sort of defenses that they do against other sort of aerial threats, missiles and radars and in some cases guns that are designed to shoot down aircraft, that are designed to shoot down cruise missiles, sort of higher end threats that demand sort of a higher end type response. The problem that they run into is that it's not that these defenses can't handle drones. It's that the cost of a drone is much lower than the cost of a missile or an aircraft sent up to intercept them.
So what would a drone wall that Ursula von der Leyen has talked about actually involve?
Nobody knows yet. The EU doesn't know yet. NATO doesn't know yet. The architecture for that kind of a system doesn't exist. I think theoretically what they would be looking at would be less of a wall and more of a intensely integrated detection network, so that any drones that came over the border, there wouldn't be any lag time in terms of detecting them when they came over. There wouldn't be any confusion about where they were headed, and the appropriate response would be easier to dial up. Now, there are other sorts of aspects to this where you could interpret a drone wall to literally mean a collection of drone interceptors, sort of small drones used to shoot down other drones that could be deployed from the border to do that sort of thing. But nobody has that yet. Again, the architecture for it doesn't exist, and it's unclear whether that's the direction they're going to ultimately go.
So what, broadly speaking, are the challenges in building up defences to this type of drone technology, which is changing so quickly?
The biggest challenge is expense, right? The technology for radars is there. The technology for infrared sensors and optical sensors are all there. And indeed, as we see from other defensive platforms that are used to shoot down cruise missiles and aircraft, the missiles are there too. The trick is going to be to scale these things down and work them out in such a way where the cost of shooting down a drone is not so wildly over the cost of the drone itself, which again is why people are looking at using small drones to intercept drones. They're looking at systems that use sort of radar-directed guns instead, so that you're shooting down drones with a bullet, which is obviously much less expensive than a missile. You're using electronic warfare systems, which are basically radio frequency jammers that can confuse or disable drones as they fly nearby, and then lasers, which are, again, very costly to develop, but the individual cost per shot of a laser is quite low.
How long would it take to build up defenses like that?
In a small area, not necessarily very long, but I think the challenge here on top of cost is the scale of Europe's border with Russia or with the areas where Russia might do these sort of drone incursions. It's a vast geographical area. And so building up a metaphorical wall of drone detection, it could take years. Again, not because the technology isn't there, but because building out enough systems and deploying them and the manufacturing required would take some time.
Do we have good examples of areas where NATO has been able to have that sort of cooperation across borders? Because, of course, we're talking about a lot of different countries along this border as well, each with their own national military and defences.
I think there's quite good cooperation already in this sort of larger air defense sphere, where NATO aircraft for years have been sent up to intercept Russian crewed aircraft that have flown into or nearby European airspace. And so that cooperation, that handing off of information between countries and deciding whose jets are going to go up and do the interception, that's already happening. So that sort of muscle memory is there. It just has to be employed in a different realm.
Okay. Gerry Doyle, our Global Defence Editor, thank you very much. For more explanations like this from our team of 3,000 journalists and analysts around the world, go to bloomberg.com/explainers. I'm Stephen Carroll. This is Here's Why. I'll be back next week with more. Thanks for listening.